From the moment you book a flight to the second your plane touches down, our entire world of travel, it really runs on these invisible signals from space. We just trust them completely without a second thought. But what happens when that trust is broken? Let's dive into it. And look, this isn't some hypothetical sci-fi movie plot. It's the big question behind a series of really alarming events that targeted some of the world's busiest airports. And in the process, they exposed a critical vulnerability in the infrastructure we all depend on. We're talking about the Global Positioning System, right? GPS. It's the silent navigator for pretty much everything, from the map on your phone to massive container ships crossing the ocean. But what we're now seeing is that these signals, well, they can be deliberately manipulated, and the consequences could be disastrous. Okay, so this brings us to a very real incident that served as a major wake-up call for everyone. This wasn't just a glitch, it wasn't random interference. The evidence points to a targeted, coordinated campaign against critical transportation hubs. The targets here were some of India's absolute busiest and most important airports. We're talking about the huge international hubs in Delhi and Mumbai, among others. The fact that these attacks were happening at the same time across all these different key locations, that was the first giant red flag that this was no accident. And this quote right here, it really nails the consensus among the experts who looked at this. The scale, the coordination, it all screamed that this was an intentional, organized effort. The goal wasn't just to cause static, it was to actively and maliciously deceive. So what was actually happening? Well, imagine you're on a plane during that critical final approach phase right before landing. Attackers were broadcasting powerful, fake GPS signals. These counterfeit signals were designed to completely mislead the plane's navigation system, making it think it was on a totally different flight path. Thankfully, a disaster was avoided, and it's because alert pilots in the cockpit recognized that something was wrong. They saw the anomalies, they ignored the fake data, and they switched over to the old-school, tried-and-true ground-based navigation systems. It just goes to show how crucial it is to have backup systems and highly trained pilots who can spot this deception in real time. So we've been using this term spoofing, but what exactly is it? It's really important to get this because spoofing is fundamentally different from what most of us think of when we hear about signal interference. It's a very sophisticated game of deception, not just crude disruption. So here's the core idea. With GPS spoofing, an attacker broadcasts their own counterfeit but way more powerful satellite signals. And because their signals are so much stronger, they overpower the real ones coming from space, tricking a device's receiver into calculating a totally false location or time. Here's probably the best way to think about the difference. Think of jamming as a heckler at a concert, shouting so loud you can't hear the music. Your GPS just stops working, it loses the signal. But spoofing is way more sinister. It's like a convincing imposter quietly whispering the wrong directions in your ear. Your GPS thinks it's working perfectly, but it's secretly leading you somewhere you don't want to go. So let's break down how this actually works, step by step. First, an attacker sets up a transmitter near their target, in this case, an airport. Then, because their signal is so much closer, it just completely overpowers the faint, authentic signals coming from satellites thousands of miles up in space. And finally, the aircraft's receiver, which is built to lock onto the strongest signal it can find, latches onto the fake data and accepts it as the truth. So this all brings up a really important question. Why are modern airports so vulnerable to this kind of attack? Well, the answer really lies in their incredible and ever-increasing complexity. See, a modern airport isn't just a runway and a terminal anymore. It's this massive, interconnected ecosystem. Yeah, you've got the GPS navigation systems for the planes, but you've also got huge IT networks, cloud platforms managing everything, countless IoT sensors on baggage carts and security cameras, even systems run by third-party vendors for check-in. Every single one of those is a potential door for an attacker. And if an attack like this were to actually succeed, the consequences are, well, they're severe. We're talking about misrouting planes on the ground or in the air, completely shutting down airport operations, creating huge public safety risks, and that's not even getting into the massive financial and reputational damage. The good news is, this incident in India didn't end in tragedy. But make no mistake, it was a profound warning. It's a wake-up call, not just for the aviation industry, but really for anyone who manages any kind of critical infrastructure. So what are the big lessons here?
First, cyber threats aren't just about stealing your data anymore. They are actively targeting physical operations and safety. Second, having separate security for your office computers and your operational tech, that creates dangerous blind spots that attackers just love to exploit. And finally, you can bet that regulators all over the world are now paying very, very close attention. What this all boils down to is a fundamental shift in thinking. For any organization running critical infrastructure, cybersecurity just isn't a nice to have IT budget item anymore. It is a core, absolutely mission critical part of keeping things running safely and reliably.
And that really leaves us with one final and pretty vital question. Every single day, our world gets more connected, more automated, and more reliant on these invisible signals from the sky. And this incident is a stark reminder that we have to ask ourselves, are our defenses evolving fast enough to protect it all?